Everyone, and welcome to this evening's Instagram Live. My name's Kim Wilcox. I'm the nutrition lead here at Brohn UK, and I am just going to add Corrine from Icesupp, who is going to be joining us this evening. To join. Really wonderful to be here with you this evening. Here comes Corrine now. Hello, Corrine. Nice to
Hi.
see you.
Hi, you too. Thank you for inviting us.
Ah, wonderful. So I was just saying hello to everyone. We've got some people joining already. So for those who've just joined, my name's Kim Wilcox. I'm the nutrition lead here at Brohn. I can see some waves in the comments. So hello to you all. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Corrine, who is a registered dietitian and also the marketing manager and dietetic consultant for Icesupp, a really wonderful company. They launched their really amazing product in August this year, a frozen nutritional supplement, really tasty, easy way to get some protein, fibre, vitamins and minerals. And we're thrilled to be collaborating with them at Brohn. So great to be with you here this evening, Corinne.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and for having ISAF. I think it's a great opportunity to talk about, some of the myths, but also some of the positive side of nutrition, and especially at Christmas when it can all feel a bit overwhelming. So hopefully we can have a helpful conversation and people can take away some practical bits of advice from this if they need it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, today, a really kind of topical area of nutrition. So we're going to be talking about how to eat well and feel good and just take care of yourself as much as possible over the festive season. If you're living with cancer, if you're going through cancer treatment right now, if you're recovering from cancer treatment. So I'm going to be picking Corinne's brains around some tips to stay nourished this holiday season, and we're hopefully going to be taking some questions from you as well. So we really would love to have some participation from those of you who've been able to join us. So do pop your questions in the chat and we will try to get through them as tech-free issue as possible.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, and get through as many as possible after our conversation. All right, let's get going, shall we? Great.
Let's.
So maybe I thought what would be a helpful place to start is if you just give an overview around what are some of the common symptoms and treatment side effects that are particularly relevant to eating when living with cancer.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. So everyone's different and everyone has their own unique journey and relationship with food, especially if going through something like cancer, which obviously can be really hard to deal with. And then it's even heightened at Christmas with everything going on around them. So I guess the first kind of acknowledgement is, we understand and we can understand it can be a really difficult time. But when you're obviously going through treatment, there's additional symptoms that you may have to deal with that can directly affect eating and drinking, like you mentioned, Kim. So some of the more common ones are things like loss of appetite. So reduced hunger could be due to either the treatments or the cancer itself, making you feel as though you don't want to eat your usual diet or eat and drink in the same way. Things like nausea and vomiting can also occur due to, the treatment. So that's either, causing a disruption with the stomach or gastrointestinal system. Things like digestive issues can also be a problem. So diarrhea and constipation can obviously impact our hunger. It's not going to make the way we view food differently if we're going through those types of symptoms. And it also potentially limits the food choices and influences what we eat and drink. And then things like the other treatments, like radiation, especially to the head and neck, can cause oral discomfort and cause us to have a sore esophagus, and that can make eating difficult. And then things like fatigue, so low energy levels, can make meal prep and eating really feel like a chore, which is that's tough to deal with, especially at Christmas, when there's maybe a few more mouths to feed than normal. And things like altered taste and smell. So food might taste differently, might taste metallic, bland, or maybe overly sweet, which can cause disruption to normal eating and drinking.
Yeah, And, you know, I think often throughout the whole of the festive season, there's so much talk of food and really kind of rich, indulgent food. You know, it's everywhere, isn't it? It's in the media, it's on the TV, it's on social media, and also the kind of like busy social season as well.
Exactly.
So with even just one of those symptoms, never mind a cluster of them, kind of, it can sometimes feel maybe impossible to get involved in the way that you would like
Yeah.
to. So really glad we could take the time this evening to give people some kind of guidance on how to navigate that if things are a little different
Yeah.
this Christmas.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
let's start perhaps with low appetite. So in a season that seems to be defined by indulgence, that can feel
Mm,
really challenging if
yeah.
you're a low appetite. What would some of your kind of tips be on managing that?
Yeah, and like you said, it's the complete opposite of what we'd expect Christmas to be. You know, when you're ready to put off food, so that's difficult. And when appetite wanes, you know, maintaining a nutritious diet can often feel like a challenge and might lead to kind of repetitive or uninspired types of meals, or even skipping meals altogether. But that obviously increases the risk of nutritional deficiencies in the short and long term. So even if your appetite is lower than normal and you're eating less than you usually would, keeping your meals as varied as possible to ensure your body gets a variety of nutrients is important. And to keep your meals varied, you know, it doesn't need to be super complicated. Just think about different colors on the plate and maybe some different flavors and different herbs and spices, because that all contributes to different nutrients and variety in your diet. And things like fresh and frozen vegetables and fruits of different colors, that's a good way to get some variety. Um, and also, it also delivers like diverse vitamins and antioxidants. So that's kind of a good place to start. And then experimenting with whole grains and brown rice, incorporating herbs and spices and sauces to introduce new flavors. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the same thing all the time. It could be, you know, maybe experimenting with some different flavors, and that may change from week to week. So it is
Yeah,
kind of accepting that, you know, it's sometimes a bit of a trial and error, and finding, you know, what you fancy at on that day, and kind of keeping it on a day rolling basis. But just keeping it fresh and varied can help make meals more exciting when your appetite is low and you're not maybe you know, eating and drinking as much or as different types of food and drink as you usually would. But then more broadly, I suppose, we would always recommend, you know, if appetite is something that you're struggling with, to think about eating small and frequent meals. So every 2 to 4 hours, maybe having a nutrient-rich snack as opposed to the regular kind of free regular meals that we would usually recommend if someone was kind of aiming for a healthy sort of balanced diet or more regular eating. Actually, sometimes when we're faced with things like symptoms and low appetite, that kind of goes we kind of go at a different angle, and we think about it, well, do you know what, actually maybe it's less kind of overwhelming for you to have a small nutritious meal every 2 to 4 hours. And that could be things like nuts. They're so super nutritious, lots of healthy fats in nuts, high protein yogurts, crackers with cheese or avocado. And going back to that kind of thought around keeping it varied, maybe adding in some different types of fruits and vegetables if you can on a similar plate. But with patients before, I've said to them, try and maybe go for smaller plates as well. So just so, because sometimes when there's a big plate, it can feel really overwhelming as well, especially when your appetite is low. So smaller plates and smaller but more frequent meals, and choosing foods that are more kind of higher in calories and higher in healthy fats, if you
yeah.
can. So yeah, they're my kind of top tips.
I'm glad you mentioned kind of colour as well, because I think often I get frustrated that the food around Christmas is often talked about focusing on the negative. And actually, when you look at a lot of the foods that are really seasonal, there's just a real abundance of kind of really
Yeah,
nutritious, colourful plant foods that sometimes maybe we eat more of at this time of year than we do at other times of year. And there's lots of scope, as you say, for varying not only the types of plant foods you're eating, but also the ways that you're cooking them. So, you know, something like red cabbage, for example, you know, if your, you know, appetite's low and you want something that's kind of easier to chew and swallow, perhaps you're dealing with a sore mouth as well, then having that, we've often put a vat of that in the slow cooker with different flavours to make it a bit more interesting. Equally, you could have it kind of crunchy as like a rainbow slaw to get a bit of variety. Root vegetables are really seasonal, aren't they? Kind of very comforting, and lots of different colours there, and can be, done in a mash or whole in a roasted.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
something's not nailed down, it's going in my air fryer at the moment, so there's
yeah,
lots of
yeah,
rainbow coloured chips.
yeah.
And then,
Nice.
and actually picky food is
Mm,
very popular now, sharing a kind of sharing platter with friends and family, a cheese board. And again, that's often talked about like, oh, something that's unhealthy, but it can be a great vessel for things like nuts and fruit, dried fruit, particularly concentrated source of nutrients as well. So yeah, I think lots of scope for getting loads of kind of good stuff in. And I'm definitely here to fly the flag that Christmas food is, can be really nutritious and often
yeah.
is.
And I think, and obviously there's the whole role of food fortification. So that sounds like a really fancy term, but also it's basically just about increasing the calorie and the protein content of a nutritious meal or snack without actually significantly increasing the volume. So for example, if you were to have the red cabbage that you spoke about, is there a way that that can be fortified with extra nutrition? So for example, I'm trying to think what would be an example of that with red cabbage. Maybe not the best example, but having a side with some cheese or adding in some extra nutrients. And then things like mashed potato, so adding in extra olive oil or maybe an extra teaspoon of butter to kind of max out that calorie, amount in that type of food. Things like porridge as well, adding an extra scoop of yogurt, making sure that it's super high fat. Sorry, my headphones coming out. Um, Things like other types of foods that you can add those kind of high protein, high fat types of ingredients to, just to max out the calories and the protein in that portion, as I say, without kind of dramatically increasing or expecting you to eat lots more food. It's about just kind of adding in some clever additions to your meals and snacks to really make that kind of portion as nutritious as possible if you're not eating it as frequently or as much.
Absolutely. So this is why we collaborate with you, because you've just kind of one of our Penny Brohn kind of catchphrases is adding, not subtracting. And
Yeah.
folks, there's always something you can add to your meal or to a snack that is going to give you some extra nutrients, and particularly important, as you say, when kind of appetite is low.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were some really, really great tips. Thank you. And you've mentioned adding protein and kind of making sure that snacks and meals have some of that. And protein is really vital at all stages of cancer, and particularly during and after cancer treatment. Do you want to just give a explanation for those listening on why this is and how much protein people with cancer should be aiming for?
Yeah, so protein is really important. It's essential for basically growing our body tissue, maintaining muscle strength, and supporting wound healing. So our bodies are in constantly a state of muscle breakdown and muscle repair. And when you are unwell or perhaps fighting something off, actually that rate of breakdown happens a lot quicker, especially if you have a wound or something where you require that extra protein. So it's really important for us to be eating enough, basically, so that we have that net protein balance for our body to draw on and essentially take from that pool of protein so that they can go off and rebuild the cells and help keep us well. And so it is really so protein is really important, and it's important to try and prioritize it if you can. So when planning your meals, I always recommend patients to build your plate around protein to ensure that you get enough. So when you're thinking about a snack or a meal, think about that source of protein first and foremost. So is it that you fancy chicken today, or some fish, or actually is it some plant-based protein that you recommend, like some tofu or some lentils and beans, and really prioritizing that protein. And then I suppose as a general rule of thumb, and not to get too technical, but we recommend everyone should eat between 1 to 1.5 grams of protein a day per kilograms of body weight. So, say for example, someone weighs 60 kilograms, that means they should eat between 60, so around 60 grams of protein. And in for context, a chicken breast that weighs about 100 grams provides around 30 grams of protein. So as you can expect, animal-based proteins are naturally quite high in protein, whereas but other types of proteins are still can still be a good source of protein. So, for example, an egg provides around 6 grams of protein. 100 grams of tofu provides around 10 grams of protein. So all still great sources of
Mm-hmm.
protein. And I suppose another thing to kind of just point out is that some proteins may be more tolerated than others. So if you're looking for something quite light and easy to digest, then white fish can be a great option because it's light and flaky. So things like cod and sole are quite easy to digest and quite light on the stomach. So that could be something to consider. And especially when you're cooking or via poaching or steaming, that's a nice way to make them super light and easy to digest. And then things like eggs as well, super easy to make. But if you do them as kind of scrambled eggs or omelets or even soft boiled eggs, really versatile, but also easy to do, but quite easy to digest and chew. And then things like tofu as well. So some people don't necessarily like tofu. I think it's the texture thing. I understand that, but it is actually a great source of protein, and it can be blended into silken tofu. Can actually be blended
Great
into
for desserts, isn't it? It's a
yeah,
great.
yeah, it's great. It can be blended into soups and smoothies for an extra protein boost, which is a nice little hack. And then there's obviously things like chicken and turkey and the ground meat, which we'd always recommend kind of leaner cuts if you can, just purely because it contains less saturated fat. That's good for our heart health. And there's, as I said before, the kind of plant-based options like lentils and beans. Nut butters, don't forget trusty old peanut butter. That's a
I
great
would
source of
never forget
protein.
peanut butter. Don't you worry about.
Yeah, it's a great. Sorry, my headphone keeps falling out. It's really annoying me. I'm just trying to keep it in. So that's. I might actually take these out to a sec. Can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah,
that's a
good.
lot better. Thank you.
It's on
Um,
my headphones earlier, so never mind. We're
yeah, do you know what? You spend loads of money on these things and they don't even work. Anyway, sorry about that. Yes, protein. And then the last kind of group that I just want to touch on is the dairy. So, I think people forget how high protein yogurt can be, and it's a really easy solution if you just want a quick snack. It's quite versatile again. You can add in some extra fruits and peanut butter, some seeds. It's quite a good way of getting nutrition. So I definitely recommend that. Throw in some dark chocolate if you fancy
with
a sweet treat.
butter
Um,
goes very well.
Yes, and then cheese as well. I think we really we sometimes tend to kind of demonize cheese, but actually, as part of a balanced diet, cheese can be a fantastic source of protein and calcium, and especially things like cottage cheese are really versatile and can pair well with savory and sweet foods, and you can add it in, as I said before, fortify your meals and your snacks with extra cheese just to get that extra calories and protein and nutrients. So yeah, cheese is
And
a
I think
fantastic time.
yeah, I've
What's
got
your
cheese in
favourite?
my brain at the moment. I think I've bought and eaten my Christmas cheese supply about twice already, so I'm to
Yeah,
back to the supermarket.
well, that's what Christmas is all about. There's an abundance of cheese. So yeah.
But I think it's important. Yeah, and I talk about cheese a lot, and particularly at this time of year. When people, it's just important to think about what is it giving you. It's giving you loads. It's a good source of protein, lots of different minerals as well as calcium, and if you like it, of course, a really enjoyable thing to share with friends. So always important to focus on the positives. I'm glad you talked about the different types of protein that might be more palatable to some people compared to others at this time of year. There's definitely, again, those a lot of rich foods and food,
Mm,
and I think everyone's digestive system struggles a little bit at Christmas,
yeah.
but not if you're dealing with cancer or cancer treatments. So that was some great tips there. I think also I would just add that thinking about low prep or pre-cooked options as well, because sometimes you can think, well, God, I just don't have it in me to go and roast some meat or kind of cook some chicken from scratch. That can feel like a bit of a chore maybe if your headspace is quite cluttered or your energy is low. So things like not the cheapest option, but I really like those kind of pre-cooked salmon fillets, and they're often
Hmm.
at the time of this time of year. A pre-cooked chicken can be great to kind of, shred and add to things, or, again, have as a snack, have as a sandwich.
Yeah.
And you mentioned yogurt. I'm just going to have to do a bit of a shout out for Skia.
Mm.
A friend of mine introduced me to their baked apple flavored yogurt, which is so it's kind of a
Mm.
low, high protein, no added sugar, and it tastes like a dessert. So if you want a really nutrient dense dessert, she did actually buy some for me, and then I hid it from my partner, so I ate it all myself. So I hope he's not watching.
That just shows how good it is then.
It's so good. So that, there are, again, lots of options for different flavors and variety, whilst also
Yeah.
getting protein in.
I love that tip. I love that tip of just like remove the guilt of what you should be doing. And, sometimes home cooking, yes, okay, that's what we all want to work towards, but sometimes it's not realistic, especially when you're feeling not your usual self. So I love that tip that you said there about removing the step of just, buy some pre-cooked options, and even the cold slices of chicken and ham and things like that in the supermarket. They're all great sources of protein and easy
Yeah,
to incorporate.
tin fish.
Yeah, and like the microwave packs of grains as well is also an easy way of getting some protein. So quinoa is a really high source of protein. And you can get pre sort of ready microwave grain packets of
And
quinoa
legume,
beans.
lots of,
Yeah,
flavored lettuce and chickpeas and things like that.
exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
some
and even a can of baked beans. Beans are very high in protein naturally, and I love a bit of beans on toast. You can't go wrong
if you
sometimes.
break
So.
the festive flavors, revert back to beans and jacket potato, you can't go
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah, I think yeah, why not? And I think yeah, just removing that expectation and as I said before, kind of just like dealing with things a day to day. What is it that you fancy?
Absolutely.
And yeah, just kind of maybe having some options on hand, like you said, having the microwavable things and some pre-cooked meat so that when you do fill up for it, you can, incorporate that into your diet, but just kind of being a little bit prepared. When you have enough energy to kind of think ahead a little bit, but it would help probably when you have those days when you don't feel like cooking to have those options available at home.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about, so another thing that tends to be, synonymous with Christmas is sweet treats, and people may be thinking lots of things around eating more sweet foods going into the festive season. What would your kind of guide be to people?
Yeah, there's so much confusing information online over sugar, and it's often really misleading. And for me, Christmas is all about finding moments of joy and amongst the chaos. And that means, of course, sweet treats. Everyone deserves a treat every now and then. And really, the latest research suggests that there is no evidence that following a sugar-free diet lowers the risk of cancer or boosts the chances of surviving if you are diagnosed. So there just really isn't robust evidence to say that if you have cancer or you're going through that, you have to cut out sugar. So hopefully that's reassuring. But just like everyone else, the goal is to not consume sugar in excess. It's about having sugary treats as part of a balanced diet. And that really is in relation to things like our dental health and also our weight, because obviously if we have too many sugary foods, we are more at risk of becoming overweight and obese, and that is a risk factor for developing cancer. So that's where the link is. But also there's, I know, some misleading information around sugar and the impact
Yeah,
that it has on the cancer itself. But
and some
as I
people
said,
do find themselves a bit more sensitive to kind of high sugar
yeah,
foods and things like fatigue as well. So it can be helpful to balance that out, just to kind of deal with some of those symptoms. But as you said, not a kind of cause effect relationship when it comes to cancer. So it can be enjoyed.
no, the research just isn't there. And actually, on the other hand, dark chocolate provides flavonoids that can actually be beneficial for your health because they contain anti-inflammatory kind of nutrients.
And quite a
So
punch as well in the dark chocolate
yeah,
too.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, so I think really, especially when your appetite is low, it can be quite conflicting because we're telling you to focus on nutrient dense foods, which obviously are likely to be high in sugar and fat sometimes. And I think it's about finding that balance of trying to keep things varied and kind of in moderation where you can, but also understanding that sometimes if you're not eating as much as you usually would, actually having a sweet treat and getting those calories and that energy is more important than just thinking about the risks of sugar and the kind of bad press that it gets. It's really about the individual and what you're going through that day. And
Yeah,
yeah, everyone, as I said, deserves a sweet treat every now and then. And
absolutely.
especially if it's dark chocolate, because then there's a bit of it is good for us. So
Jumped in, just to get that in there. Um, and it's also important to remember that that Christmas is just a couple of weeks, isn't it? So yes, we've talked about kind of getting varied nutrients in and keeping things balanced, but equally, if you indulge more than normal, if there's desserts everywhere and someone's bringing boxes of chocolates around and that's what you fancy and it feels good and you share that with family and friends or just want a moment of comfort and R&R to yourself, even if you do that more over the next couple of weeks, it is just a couple of weeks, and a couple of weeks is not going to define anything long
yeah.
term. So sometimes it's just about going, actually, I'm just going to enjoy Christmas and listen to what my body and mind needs, and know that it is just a short, look at the big picture.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose on the flip side, if you are finding as though, the sugar is starting to make you, because you get 3 day or 4 days in, sometimes you can feel as though, oh, oof, like I've had quite a lot of
Right.
chocolate, I can start feeling a little bit sluggish, and we all get like that. There are ways to kind of get that sweet hit, if you like, but also maybe make some like snacks or meals that actually have a kind of a bit more nourishing than just, let's say, a chocolate out of a celebrations box or something. Not that I can mention brands, but there's some really great recipes on the Penny Brohn website. So energy balls, for example, and they're really easy to make. Just some peanut butter, some nuts. Even you can even add some protein powder for some extra nutrition. Things like chocolate bark as well. So dark chocolate with some fruit and some nuts, and you just basically pour that into a tray, put it over some baking powder, and then let it sort of put it in the fridge, let it chill, and then you've got yourself some really delicious chocolate bark with dark chocolate, as I said, some cranberry, some nuts in there. You can kind of keep it, add some different types of ingredients, and then yeah, if you're looking for something, if actually on the other side of things you're at risk of malnutrition and you're finding that you're losing weight and you're looking to really build yourself up, there's also some recipes on the Penny Brohn website there of things like lime cheesecake, which are really calorific and delicious and exactly what you might need at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's important, isn't it? Because there's a difference between, I mean, I absolutely have a sweet tooth at the end of every meal. I know that I need something sweet. So there's a big difference between something that I might have at the end of every meal compared to something that you have, over the space of a couple of weeks as a season. And I think it's about, just trying to tune into, what do I need? What does my body need?
Yeah,
What does my mind need? What feel good right now? Sometimes that's really indulgent cheesecake. Sometimes it might be a sweet energy ball. Thank you for pointing out the Penny Brohn recipes on the website. Some of those are quite low or no prep too as well. So I would definitely encourage people to check out the energy balls if they haven't already. I always say I'm a nutritionist, not a chef, and even for me, they take a couple of minutes to kind of squeeze together in a bowl, and they keep in the freezer really well for a long period of time. So yeah, give them a go.
nice. Yeah.
Um, let's move on to maybe to fluids as well, because that's something that often might not be thought about as much as food, but can be particularly important for everyone, but particularly important when you're dealing with certain symptoms and side effects of cancer and cancer treatments. And so what would be kind of your tips around staying hydrated through the festive season?
Yeah. So, as you said, hydration is really important for everyone. It's recommended that we get about 1.5 to 2 liters as a minimum a day of fluid. And dehydration occurs when essentially your body is losing more fluid than it takes in. And the reason why people with cancer are particularly vulnerable to dehydration is because if they're going through symptoms like nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, fever without infection, which can make us really hot and cause excess sweating, things like, obviously it's horrible to say, but bleeding, fluid loss during procedures or surgeries, or even difficulty swallowing, so difficulty taking on that fluid, means that you're just not topping up your reserves, or you're losing more fluid than you a healthy kind of you would normally. So it is really important to recognize dehydration, but it's not always straightforward. The biggest tip is to be really cognizant of the color of your urine. So if you really want it to be kind of clear to light straw color, but if it's looking really dark and brown, then it may indicate that you are dehydrated. So definitely keep an eye on your urine. And there's other things that are kind of sign can notify you that you're dehydrated. So dry mouth or lips, even just feeling thirsty is a notification that you're dehydrated. Dry or cracked, swollen tongue, skin that feels dry, or stays tented when pinched. So if you pinch your skin, it doesn't go back into its usual position. That could indicate that you're dehydrated. Sunken eyes, and also if we're dehydrated, can actually have a knock-on impact on our appetite. So
Mm,
sometimes
mm,
it can
mm.
lead us to have reduced appetite when actually we're dehydrated. So my top tips are to drink small amounts of fluids frequently. So going back to the kind of proposition that we mentioned before around eating smaller meals more regularly, it's the same thing with fluid. I think sometimes drinking a litre or 2 litres of fluid can feel really overwhelming. So actually it's just about sipping throughout the day. Um, and often as well, colder and iced beverages can be more appealing and much more easier to drink than something that's like room temperature.
Mm.
So that kind of factor of being chilled or frozen is a real big kind of part of that enjoyment of drinking something and eating. And that's why I suppose I really am passionate about Icesupp, because it's designed to be frozen, so it's all about that kind of enjoyment factor and a moment of refreshing relief
Yeah.
when you're having it. So you know, if you do enjoy kind of iced or frozen drinks or foods, then things like sucking on ice chips as well can really help. And adding flavors to your hydration, so adding things like lime and citrus and berries and squash, and just making things a bit more palatable if you're struggling with drinking normal water. And then also just keeping things within reach. So keeping a bottled water by the side of you, so you don't necessarily have to go up and fill your cup up every time. Just kind of having something on hand with keeping it chilled with some ice. And then I mean, you can also track your food and fluid intake if that's useful for you, to make sure that you can kind of check in to see how much hydration you've had. I often find the bottles that have kind of like times on them are really
Yeah,
helpful, because you can see I
loads of
have
great tools
yeah,
around.
you can get them from Amazon or a supermarket, and they just say, right, by 2 o'clock I've drunk this much, and you refill it just once in a day. So you've got enough to drink around 1.5 to 2 litres, which is what we all need. And you may need a little bit more actually if you're at risk of dehydration. So yeah, and I think also it doesn't necessarily just have to be about what we drink. Actually, just having some lip balm and moisturizer to prevent the cracked lips, because it's really uncomfortable as well when you're dehydrated. So yeah, there's my top tips. Do you have any more tips, Kim?
Yeah, great. And I'd say one of the things I always say to people is, if you do want something that is, and obviously Icesupp's a great example of something that gives you a bit of, flavour and that nice soothing texture. Something that I've said to people previously as well is, frozen fruits just kind of blended with
Yeah,
just a water. Um, you can get some ginger in there, some lemon in there, and again gives a really like nice slushy flavour.
yeah,
Lot of nutrition in there as well, from the fruits, and can just feel a little nicer than maybe just having water. And I think I would just reiterate everything you said about playing around with things that feel enjoyable and that
mm,
makes dehydrated less of a
yeah,
chore. I think sometimes hydration isn't as on people's minds as eating. And so it might take just a little bit of prior thought and awareness to kind of get into the habit of it. But I do find with people the habit comes once you kind of
yeah,
get used to that. And I mean, it's seasonal herbal tea is really wonderful as well. So that, I had some lovely kind of cinnamon or ginger or kind of clove based
yeah, lovely.
herbal and fruit teas at the moment that can just be a nice moment of R&R whilst
Totally.
getting hydration in.
Yeah, and that tea and coffee and herbal teas all count. Coffee, some people think that it's dehydrating, and The thing with that is, I think if you're used to drinking a certain amount of coffee, then it's actually not dehydrating because you've habitually got used to drinking 2 cups of coffee a day or whatever. It's when all of a sudden you go from 2 to 3 cups of coffee to 7 or 8, then your body gets out of flux, and that's when it dehydrates you. So actually, if you're used to a certain level of coffee or caffeine containing drinks, then you've kind of become used to that. But as spoken like a true dietitian, we would always recommend choosing water as your primary choice of hydration. And things like smoothies and fruit juices are obviously like that. They can contain sugar, which actually they have a nutritional factor. They contain vitamin C. Usually, healthy eating sort of guidelines, we would usually say stick to about 150 mils a day of a smoothie or fruit juice, and that's just because the kind of sugar, then its impact on your dental health and things like that. But I think if that's what you genuinely love drinking, a tip for me would be to just dilute it with some water every time you go for the smoothie, and if you're going to continue to drink that throughout the day, add some water, dilute it so it just goes a bit further and it's a bit more hydrating.
And you can add other things to it as
Yeah,
well, can't you? Not just the fruit and the carbs, the protein, whether that's yogurt or milk or plant milk.
yeah,
Some
so true. You can make a milkshake. Yeah,
Yeah, wonderful, great stuff. Now we touched on it slightly there around kind of flavor infused water, which kind of brings me on to my next question around nausea between meals, and there are certain herbs and infused water that can be helpful with that. Do you want to speak about that and any other tips you'd have on people dealing with
yeah,
nausea, which can be
yeah,
really this time of year when everyone else is eating and getting stuck in?
completely. And nausea can make eating feel impossible. So I really empathize with anyone that's struggling with nausea. The first thing I would do is obviously consult your healthcare professional, because there may be some things that some medications or some tips and tricks that your GP or your specialist nurse might be able to recommend to help with the sickness. Things like antiemetics, for example, can help to reduce the nausea. So I would definitely consult your healthcare professional if nausea is something that you're struggling with. But in the meantime, there are kind of some foods and some flavors, as you say, that can help. So ginger is kind of really traditionally known for helping to alleviate symptoms of nausea, and there's lots of gingerbread around
Yeah,
at this time of
great
year.
ingredient, great Christmas ingredient.
Yeah, so gingerbread, and that's obviously got its own nutritional factor, but you could even add in some yogurt to make that a bit more high protein, or sprinkle some ginger biscuits over the yogurt, over some porridge, just to really maximize out that meal. And then yeah, kind of adding even fresh or ground ginger to teas or soup. So if you had to have something like a ginger tea, you could add fresh ginger. Equally, if you were to have a kind of let's say coconut milk based soup or something, you could add ground ginger, and then baked goods like we've spoken about. So yeah, so lots of opportunities for ginger, especially around this time of year. And mint, and so peppermint tea, mint infused water can sometimes help with feelings with nausea symptoms, and it also can be quite refreshing and soothing. And citrus, so sometimes sharp, kind of sour tasting. I'm going to move over just to make sure my battery doesn't run out. Can help, because sometimes people's taste changes. It's difficult to have what you're used to, and actually sometimes those sharper flavors can help people to enjoy kind of those stronger flavors, and can also help with nausea. um, and yeah, things like kind of herbs and mild spices. We would, on the other side of things, maybe what to avoid would be things like heavy spices like chili. We can actually sometimes aggravate nausea because it can cause maybe some GI disturbances if you're sensitive to that, and that can maybe worsen the nausea, and can also make, if you've got a sore mouth, kind of make that maybe worse. So on the other side, kind of just maybe keep an eye out for things like chili, or strong things like garlic or onion. That might be something that kind of can trigger your nausea. So maybe if you are using seasoning, which obviously we would recommend, and keep things varied and flavoursome, go for things like dill, parsley, or basil, which are quite neutral, but will help give your food some flavour. So really depends on the person.
Yeah,
But yeah, just kind of
yeah,
good to have some flavors to maybe experiment with. And you don't have to have really bland food if you're feeling nauseous. You can still enjoy flavoursome food and drink. It's just finding what works for you.
Yeah, great. And I think sometimes it's because it is really different, isn't it, from one person to the next. So, kind of making a note of things that you notice stimulate that kind of nausea and things that help kind of soothe it to kind
Yeah,
of what works what works for you. And definitely another good reason to kind of think about nourishing fluids that you can sip on,
yeah,
low appetite, isn't it? You're feeling a bit nauseous and you just can't tolerate much, or anything that takes much effort to eat. Nourishing fluids can be helpful in the meantime.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Um, and thinking about a sore mouth, we've touched on kind of soups and different textures of foods already. You just kind of expand on, particularly with a sore mouth, what types of foods this season might people find helpful.
Yes, so we actually did a blog on the Penny One website about this. So if you are struggling with a sore mouth, then definitely do check that out. But it's definitely just thinking about textures and temperatures. So how can you make, how can you adapt a food to be softer and easier to consume? So, for example, if you are having something like a shepherd's pie, how can you make that even more saucy or with the extra gravy just to make it really easy for for you to chew basically, and things like, it sounds obvious, but avoiding really really hot things, really really spicy things that are going to aggravate your sore mouth, and perhaps maybe going towards some kind of more chilled ice cold foods to help alleviate and provide some kind of refreshing relief. And I think, particularly around this time, soups are a great idea because you can pack in so many nutrients in one soup. And if low appetite is something that you're struggling with and you're therefore facing, a risk of losing weight, which we want to try and avoid that. We want to try and maintain your weight, especially if you're going through a cancer treatment, or kind of recovering. Then you can add in lots of extra nutritious ingredients to soups, like coconut milk or extra yogurt, double cream, just whatever you like, but you can definitely pack in lots of nutrients. And the great thing about them as well is that they're full of vegetables, which are full of fiber and antioxidants and lovely nutrients, and they're quite versatile. I quite like adding a scoop of yogurt or creme fraiche on my soups, like a tomato soup, and you could maybe even try adding some grated cheese.
I often
But
say
I guess,
unflavoured protein powder
yeah,
also quite well kind of stirred into a soup.
yeah,
Change like the flavour or the texture of
yeah,
it, and coconut milk would be another go-to, and ground almonds get
yeah,
little bit of extra protein and fibre. So
yeah,
they're a great vessel, aren't they?
yeah.
Soup.
Yeah, just sprinkling things on top, like the nuts and seeds, and if that's kind of from a textural point of view, whether you can kind of whether that's okay for you.
Nut butter, if not.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, just going back to kind of what we were saying around adapting things, it's not, nothing really should be completely off the table. It's just about how can you adapt it. So even with a soup, it's, can you blend that? Can you get a hand blender and blend that so it's super smooth and that there's not too much texture if that's something that you struggle with. And also, just to avoid serving it piping hot, because that's obviously going to be quite difficult if you've got a really sensitive mouth.
Yes.
So yeah, just kind of thinking about how can I adapt the meals that I like to have. It's not, definitely don't think, oh, I can't have them anymore. Just maybe think about adapting them.
And similarly, like, if people are having kind of, I don't know, more like your typical Christmas roast dinner, and maybe thinking about, well, actually, what in that roast dinner works really well adapted into a soup. So I've seen some like, roast parsnip soups, and looking at a recipe, I think it was the Hairy Bikers, where they'd done like chestnuts, butternut squash, and Bramley apple. And I thought, I'm gonna have to give that one a go this Christmas. But most things, can be kind of
Yeah,
adapted to a soup, struggling to eat them in their whole form. And the other thing that we talk a lot about at Penny Brohn about, if even making a soup feels a bit much right now, for whatever reason, but particularly things like fatigue, then often the supermarket soups in the refrigerator section, have a great amount of vegetables in. They're not always the most substantial. Some of them are, but not all of them. But again, using that as a base to add things to
yeah,
it. That's again, ground almonds or coconut milk or olive oil, powder,
yogurt, cream. Yeah,
yogurt, cream, or anything. Sometimes it's a bit Middle Eastern, isn't it? But like chopped egg
Oh,
on top of
cool.
food. So
Yeah,
yeah,
nice,
probably
nice.
work with certain flavors, but I'm always of a mind you can put an egg on top of most.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Why not? Why not? Or, more protein,
yeah.
the better.
um, Wonderful. Now, we've talked a lot about things to add in, which is definitely where I want to focus. But is there anything that people with cancer should avoid or should be mindful of during Christmas?
Yeah, and we obviously this whole conversation has been about what can we add in, how can we adapt. It's not about getting things off the table. But there are some people who may be at risk of neutropenia. So what that means is some particular cancers have specific treatments that mean that you have to go through a certain treatment, and the consequence of that is that it impacts your immune system. And some treatments may temporarily reduce the number of white blood cells in your body, and those white blood cells play a really key role in fighting infections. And so that's why those particular people may be advised to avoid certain foods. So just for kind of, I suppose, context, there are some foods that may contain higher amounts of bacteria that could potentially cause infection. So for example, raw or lightly cooked eggs. It's just not to say you can't have eggs, it's just to make sure that they're really properly cooked, because uncooked eggs may carry bacteria in them, and then they may put you at more risk. It's very unlikely in nowadays,
Mm.
eggs that we have and the ones that we're farmed. But if that's you and you are at risk of neutropenia, then we would always just be more sort of careful than sorry. And yeah, we'd avoid unpasteurized milk and yogurt, so just make sure it's pasteurized. If you, I know some people love them, but things like blue cheese, the soft ripened cheese,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just because it's, again, just kind of as a higher risk of it carrying bacteria, which, especially if your blood count, your white blood cells is low, you're just at more risk of infection.
There's
So
loads of other cheeses that are on the menu, aren't there?
exactly, you can have lots of other cheeses like cheddar, and yeah, lots of other good cheeses. So yeah, it's not to say you can't have cheese, just particular types of ones. And then also things like pate. So when I was doing kind of some research around this, it is recommended that if you're an individual that has to be wary of these foods, that pate is something that you do avoid. But as an alternative, there's things like olive tapenade and dips such as hummus and tzatziki, so you can still get that kind of extra boost of flavour
Yeah.
on the
How
cheese
about
board.
mushroom pate? I saw mushroom pate
Yeah,
shops.
do you know what? I looked into this. I'm not too sure. It depends on how it's made.
Yes.
So if it's kind of raw mushrooms, then maybe not. But I'd need to look into it.
Yeah.
I think it's all pates,
Yes.
but I would need to check that one. But definitely meat the pates.
Yes.
Avoid those if
Olive
you are at
tapenade,
risk.
really flavoursome, isn't it? And good, quite a similar thing
Yeah,
to
yeah,
these other
yeah.
noodles.
And then the last just couple ones are just things like cold meats that have been smoked but not cooked. So things like salami, sometimes because of the way that it's been made, it can be potentially have a higher risk of carrying bacteria that can put you at risk of infection. And the last thing is just like things like unwashed fruit, vegetables, and salads. So just to be really careful of food hygiene and being super diligent in the kitchen, washing hands and things like that. But as I said, that's only for those people that are going through specific treatments whereby their immune system is changed and therefore at higher risk of infection.
Yeah, and they will have been advised by their treatment team or a diet working with them, won't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So
So,
always speak to a healthcare professional if you have any concerns. As I said, this is not a blanket recommendation for everyone. It's only for very specific types of people that are going through certain types of
yeah,
treatment.
absolutely. Okay, so to start to round up then, do you have, we've talked about some really great stuff, you've given some great tips. Any other additional tips you wanted to kind of leave with for enjoying
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
season?
So my 4 top tips, I've got just some extra ones here. So I think we've already mentioned it before, but picky foods. And there's loads of picky foods available, especially at the moment, and they're probably the best types of picky foods that you can get because there's so many different types and picky foods and innovations. And the reason why I bring them up is because sometimes having, when your appetite is low or you're struggling with symptoms, facing that meal or that plate of food can feel really overwhelming and a challenge. And I think it's just important to normalize having foods that you fancy, picky bits here and there. If you're eating little and often, that might be even better for you in terms of making sure you're getting nutrition that when you feel the most kind of ready to take on that food and drink. And picky foods are just really great for having on hand in the fridge. We're talking sausage rolls, cocktail sausages, quiche, crude eats, so kind of, carrots and celery and things,
Happy bits.
nuts, yeah, like grapes, cubes of cheese, hummus, just easy food basically. And we want to help you alleviate that stress around Christmas as much as possible if eating and drinking is a challenge at the moment. So just making things as easy as possible for yourself. So I'd say picky foods for the win if you're struggling with your eating and drinking at the moment. The second thing I would say is on the days that you do feel better, or whenever you can, really try and pre-plan if you can. So having food ready in the fridge or on your cupboards helps you just kind of remove some of that stress when you're not feeling up to properly eating and drinking. So we spoke a little bit about the pre-cooked protein and things like that, having maybe some kind of snacky bits available, but also if you're able to, cooking meals in batch, so having big batch cooks of lasagnas and chilies and nutritious foods that you like, because that's the first one. Is that something that you
Yeah.
like to have? And then actually, if you know that's going to work for you, for me, for example, I always love a lasagna. I'm never not in the mood for a lasagna. So if that's you, what is there anything like that you like that you could make in bulk and have in the freezer for times when you're just
Slow
not
cooker
feeling like cooking?
season, if you have one, then that's super helpful, isn't it, for batch cooking?
Yeah, I love my slow cooker. Yeah, for sure. So just a bit of forward planning, if possible. And then my third tip is don't forget to ask for help from loved ones. It's Christmas can be an amazing time, but can also be quite overwhelming and stressful for so many of us. And I think being able to just reach out and ask for help is, so okay. And, that's what our loved ones and our friends are here for, to help you. And I think, yeah, just don't be hard on yourself if you need a little bit of help. It's okay. So that would be my third tip. And the last one is, if you're not able to meet your nutritional requirements through food and drink alone, or you're finding that you're losing weight unintentionally, because that's the important word, that it's unintentional. You don't want to be losing weight. You're not, actively trying to lose weight, but you're still losing weight. Then you may wish to consider some nutritional supplements. So talk to your dietitian, talk to your GP about the best options for you. There's a variety of supplements available. So yeah, just make sure to have that conversation with your healthcare professional, because essentially a supplement is just a top up, a bit of a boost alongside your usual diet that can actually really help you get extra nutrition in, and they can be really helpful on the days that you need them. So that's just my four top
Great.
tips just around that.
And I think that's a useful point in that, if people are, if any of these symptoms we've talked about today are significantly impacting food intake, then do keep speaking to your treatment team and to a dietitian around that for some additional support, and so they can monitor you appropriately. I think. Do I have anything to add to those wonderful tips? So I've talked about the slow cooker. I'm a big fan of tray bake recipes for those kind
Yeah.
of prepping ahead. So what is going to be as low effort as possible, but give me as big a yield as possible. And I noticed today. So Cook, do you know
Yeah.
the brand that do the kind of home prep meals, and they've got a fantastic Christmas section.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah, so I'm all for thinking. I am always on the lookout for nutritious ready meals, because I think that label gets a bit of a bad rep, and they're not all cut the same, are they? And that can be a really, just acknowledging that actually sometimes I cook, or maybe the whole family doesn't want to cook, and
Exactly.
stick something in the oven. And there are some great options out there. So
Yeah.
yeah, browse of their Christmas section. And the other one, this is a bit broader and more around kind of just looking after yourself in general. I wish I'd clocked where I saw this on social media. It's probably testament to how I've been scrolling a bit too much lately. But I saw someone say, instead of kind of thinking about having a happy Christmas, wishing people a gentle Christmas. And
Lovely.
isn't it? And because, you know, for loads of reasons, but particularly when, you know, living with cancer and, you know, particularly if you're going through treatment around about this time, but loads of other reasons as well. Like sometimes that expectation that it will be all light and joyful is a difficult expectation to have. And for some people, it might be that, but thinking about what could I do to make it a gentle Christmas for me, whatever that means for me right
now. Totally. And I think no one's Christmas is perfect.
No.
I think when you come to terms and accept that, then you take the pressure off yourself, because it's easy to go on social media and see, you know, your friends having a perfect Christmas and the way they set up their Christmas tree. Oh, doesn't that look amazing? And actually, you know, social media can paint a picture of perfection when it's not real.
Tears that's gone into that Christmas tree, or some of the stuff that's going on behind.
It's the same with food. You know, someone might post a big meal and spread, and that might make you feel as though you're missing out, that you're doing something wrong. But there's always things that go on behind people's, you know, the screen, and
real,
you know, I think it's just accepting that perfection isn't possible, and just to enjoy the small wins at Christmas.
Absolutely, definitely, couldn't agree more. So thank you, Corrine. There's some fantastic tips and insights. We've packed a lot into that session. Just to recap some of the key points for people to take away with. So I think that kind of idea of a gentle Christmas, whatever that means for anyone who's listening, the holidays really are about kind of joy and connection. And maybe that has nothing to do with food at all. You know, there are lots of other ways to find joy and connection with people right now if eating what you would like to eat is a bit difficult. Corrine, you've mentioned our Penny Brohn recipe section, so I would definitely encourage people to check that out for some maybe ideas and inspirations, and lots of simple, quick recipes on there. And also on our Well section of the website, you can download some not only our healthy eating guidelines, but also particularly relevant to today's topic, eating when eating becomes difficult and eating well during cancer treatment, which really kind of is some takeaway resources that really mirrors everything that you've talked about here today, Corrine. And of course, do go and check out Icesupp's wonderful website and have a look at their fantastic nutritional supplements, worth stocking up on if you fancy.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kim.
Wonderful. Now I'm just going to see if there are any questions that have been put in the chat. Let me have a quick scroll. I can't see any at the moment, so there are still a couple of minutes if anyone did have a question. I can see that Charlie is very pleased around the dark chocolate recommendation, so that's on her festive shopping and to eat list, which is great.
Brilliant.
And what I would say is that if anyone thinks of any questions after they've got off today's live, or if you're watching this as a recorded version, then please do drop us a line at Penny Brohn. Our contact on our website, and we can follow up with you directly. And that, I guess, just leaves me to say, thank you again, Corrine. It's been really great to chat about all things food and all things Christmas and how to help people take care of themselves at this time. And just really great to chat. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me and Icesupp, and if there's any questions afterwards, as you say, like, feel free to forward them on to me. I'm very happy to help. But thank you for all you do at Penny Brohn, and wishing everyone a really lovely Christmas and some special times with their loved ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be working together, Corrine. Great to be here with you all this evening, everyone. And all my best wishes for a happy or gentle Christmas, whatever that means to you. Take very good care of yourselves and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.